everyone, it's Kristan with Explicitly Pro-Life. Thanks for tuning in this week. This week I have a very special guest, former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. We are here in Milwaukee, and we're going to have a conversation today about some partnership opportunities, some things that we've been working on together. If you read my emails, and yes, I write them, and yes, I do reply to them, Students for Life recently launched a sister organization, Students for Life Action, which is a 501c4 organization, which means we can do more regarding elections and state legislative fights and federal legislation fights, something that we've been constantly been pulled into with having 1,200 groups across, 50 states, of how more we can get the pro-life gen interested and involved in the political process. We know that, the political is not the be-all, end-all for victory of our movement, because our movement relies on making abortion illegal and unthinkable. But politics is a very important place that we have to fight. So today I asked Governor Walker, we were here for a board meeting for Students for Life Action, but I asked the governor to come on to the podcast so we can share a little bit about our plans, what we've got coming up, what we discussed, what we hashed out today. One of the things I know we talked a lot about this morning was a post-Roe America.
Right.
This is something that the mainstream press is really interested in. When we started Students for Life 13 years ago this week, I used to introduce myself as, hey, I'm Kristan. I started this group called Students for Life America. We're a post-Roe organization. And a lot of my friends actually at the time told me I need to stop saying that because I was freaking everybody out by saying that we were post-Roe 13 years ago. Like, no one... That was considered too naive, too crazy, too extreme. But now I'm so excited because now I can say as much as I want, because this is something that's going to become reality very soon. Many of us believe, and it's something that the left certainly believes. Planned Parenthood.
That's why they're fighting so hard.
That's what. Their new president.
Shuts their business down.
Yeah, their new president just came out. Her first interview at CBS, said, I believe Roe versus Wade's in serious jeopardy. I'm like, yeah, we finally agree on something. Planned Parenthood. So you and I are going to be talking on college campuses, and we just had an op-ed published, a Real Clear Politics, about what a post-Roe America looks like. Because I think, one of the things we have to do as a pro-life movement is we have to demystify that unknown, right? The left, and any time in politics, your opponent's going to use the unknown as that scare tactic.
Right.
And so in order to make it not scary, we just have to simply say, this is what it's going to be like, and this is what we envision. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, as a former governor, someone who's kind of walked the walk, talked the talk here in Wisconsin, what are some of the policies that you're thinking that we need to, as a pro-life movement, need to be thinking about right now for a post-Roe America, whether it's in states, whether it's in communities, or whether it's in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill?
Well, across the board, you got to do more to support women, more to support families, whether it's early on with thinking about supporting healthy pregnancies. A lot of the myth about Planned Parenthood is that somehow they're involved with healthy women's programs. It couldn't be further from the truth. They're about making money and about abortion. And so doing more to make sure you're not just defunding Planned Parenthood, but putting those dollars into legitimate, non-controversial programs that help women and help families, not only through childbirth, but thereafter. I mean, one of the things we did in Wisconsin, particularly proud about, we worked on our Medicaid system first time ever. People are shocked when I say first time ever. It didn't matter, it was a Democrat or Republican governor. First time ever while I was governor, we covered everyone living in poverty under Medicaid.
And you were a Republican.
I'm a Republican.
You were a Republican, the shout out.
And I didn't take the Medicaid expansion in Obamacare because I didn't like the problems with Obamacare either. So, in fact, just recently, the current governor, Democrat, acknowledged that insurance premiums just on the regular market for individuals in Wisconsin were going down by about 3.2%. So actually going down. So
that's like unheard of.
Right. Lower
when anyone
premiums.
has insurance policies, they always go up.
Exactly.
Your goal is to be like under 18%.
Exactly. The key is to have the percentage of increase go down. This actually went down because of a program we've done over the last few years. So covered everyone. didn't take the Medicaid expansion because I had real problems with Obamacare.
Sure.
Still saw insurance premiums going down on healthcare plans in the state. But it's more than just that. It's making sure that kids have good prenatal care. It's making sure when they're born they have good health care. It's making sure they have access to great education. So
That's right.
we made tremendous gains in public education, but also in choice and in charter schools. Understanding that I actually trust parents, and so do a lot of others, to make the right choice for their sons or daughters. Doing things like changing the tax code to put a bit better benefit on getting rid of the marriage penalty and providing more per child so that people who have children actually have some assistance, because you and I both know having kids, yours are younger, mine are older now, but there's a lot of cost incurred with having kids. And even just things like we dramatically changed the foster care system. We changed adoptions. We made it easier to adopt, and we made it more supportive for people who were caring for kids in foster care. All those things tie together. And I think over decades, Planned Parenthood and others who are radicalized on the abortion movement have tried to make it seem like any of us who are pro-life only cared about making abortion illegal. What you said is exactly what we care about, is making abortion just unthinkable, unacceptable. But we understand that the circumstances that sometimes put people in those situations aren't going to go away.
Yeah.
We just want to give them better options so that they don't think about abortion, but that they know that doesn't mean that there aren't people willing to help them out, get them on their feet, and help them and their families going forward.
That's great. I loved everything you said. If every governor in America just did what you said, we'd be great. We would have a post-Roe America.
Well, we can do it at every level.
That's
The
right.
president and Congress, you can do it, governor, you can even do it at the state and local level. There's just so many ways, and those should be things that aren't partisan. I mean, making sure that families are strong, keeping families intact, making sure kids are healthy. I mean, those are all things that can be done in a way that's very positive and actually very cost effective. If you help kids early on and they start out healthy, chances are through the rest of their life they're going to be healthy. But there's just simple things. Even what we call the success sequence. We took it from, of all places, the Brookings Institute had a report on this, so not exactly a hardcore conservative think tank, but they affirmed what we tried to do throughout our 8 years as governor, and that is if you push a success sequence that says, hey, if you get an education, you get a job, you get married and have a kid, the chances are that you're going to live, I think it's like 98% of the people who do those four simple things are living middle class or higher lives. Not that money alone is the sole answer, but we can do things to help people, support people, to make those things going forward possible. And then that helps everything in society.
That's right.
If you value life, everything else works.
That's right. I mean, we started our Pregnant on Campus program in 2011, and the idea was very simple. A child who's born into poverty is 7 times more likely to live in poverty his or her own life. So if you want to impact his life or her life, you have to start by making sure his or her mother gets the degree that she needs and that she can go out and be a contributing member of the workforce. And that it's not going to be easy, certainly, especially if she's a single mother, if the partner is not involved, the father is not involved. But you're going to give her and her child the best chance of success by making sure she can actually graduate college and not feel like she has to drop out because she's pregnant.
Right, and there's good policies that interchange in there. So, for example, we made it easier to have virtual schools in Wisconsin. We expanded opportunities there.
That's huge.
Now, it's good for a lot of reasons, not just this, but if a young girl is pregnant in high school age girl, she might choose to go to a virtual school where it's easy to care for her child. It's easier to go through even before that, through a pregnancy, where she doesn't physically have to be on the campus of the school the whole time.
Right.
There are ways to do that. Later in the college or even an associate degree, we created the University of Wisconsin Flex option, which again, it's not just for this reason. It's for all sorts of non-traditional students out there, but it gives the option of saying, instead of having to be on campus, not just through online virtual education, but even through alternatives to the classroom, those are ways that, for a lot of parents, getting up and taking off a semester, living away from home, being away from work is not viable. But we provided ways to make it easier for people in those sorts of circumstances.
That's huge. And that's so refreshing, because this is exactly what we need. We need kind of out of the box ideas and thinking about how do we solve these very real problems that there should be solutions to. You mentioned not wanting to take, the federal match for Obamacare, the kind of holding states hostage plan that President Obama had. I think I have an answer to this, but I'd like to hear your answer. Why is Obamacare a bad idea for Americans? Or America, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, to me, the idea, and it's even worse when you do Medicare for all, which may sound on the surface like it's good, but the idea of giving government control over anything.
That's what I'm leading up to, is this Medicare for all crap that we're hearing right
but particularly
now.
giving, well, not only the fact that if you're an average citizen who gets their health insurance from an employer, you're going to see a massive tax increase, and you're not going to see the
And you're going to
offset.
lose your insurance.
Right.
Like
You're not
Kamala actually said, you're going to lose your insurance.
You're not going to get private insurance right now. And if people say, I got a problem with my insurance, well, try it with the federal government. I mean, think of sadly, all over the years, over the last decade, all the military families who've talked about the problems they have with the VA. Thankfully, they made some improvements out there, but it's still some significant challenges depending where you're at across the country. But the idea, you compare what you get from FedEx or UPS versus the postal system. You look at all the other look at how many people across America, would you like to go to DMV and get your health care taken care of? I think most people, no matter how many improvements have been made in the Department of Motor Vehicles, would not want to stand in line and go through that process to get, not just for you, but for your kids, for your family. And that's really the problem. We need a system that doesn't treat people like a statistic, but rather has patient-centered, focused out there that treats people like an individual. You don't get that under Obamacare, and you certainly wouldn't get that under Medicare for all.
No, that's what we're hearing. We're going to hear it over and over again this election cycle. Democrats are all about Medicare for all. That's, their new socialized medicine push. And as someone who has 2 children with high, complex, expensive medical illness, cystic fibrosis, that scares me more than anything else that they say, because it's kids like mine who get left out of the system, right? Who have a rare, uncurable genetic disease that only a handful of people have throughout the world, and who Gunnar and Gracie's, one of their prescriptions, for example, is expensive. You might as well you could buy a new car every single month for what it costs, and these are drugs that thankfully we have access to them because we live here in America, where we actually are paying for the R&D. In the UK, for example, the drug that Gunnar and Gracie are on, the government, the British government, is actually refusing to give it to cystic fibrosis patients. They had 80,000 dosages that actually expired this spring on the shelf because they refused to negotiate with Vertex Pharmaceuticals, based in Boston, on the price. They don't care. To them, it's worth. This was like the first drug in the history of the world, actually, that corrects a genetic defect that actually we know, and most cystic fibrosis, scientists and experts believe can actually extend the life of our children up to a decade long. And patients in the UK still don't have access to it because they have socialized health care.
Right.
And then I'm supposed to believe that this is a good I've heard it. Why I'm asking you this is because I've heard it, especially with pro-life young people. I've heard this argument of, well, I'm pro-life for, the child in the womb, to the 2-year-old living in poverty, to the mom in crisis. Therefore, I should be for, Medicare for all because that helps everybody. And that's a pro-life policy. But in fact, it's not. The socialized healthcare is not a pro-life policy. And in fact, what it's going to do is people who are vulnerable are the ones who are going to be left out. And the rest of us are going to be basically dealing with really crappy healthcare coverage.
Like we see elsewhere in the world. That's exactly right.
Waiting in line for what
and people with means end up coming to the United States. Right. We see it all the time.
Yeah. People who have money, they're still going to go where they need to go, and the rest of us are going to be dealt with what's the rest. And so I think that's a really important thing that the pro-life movement actually needs to be talking more and more about, is this Medicare for all, and what does that actually mean? We fought Obamacare back in 2009, 2010. We said, look, this is going to be the largest expansion of abortion ever, and we were right. Planned Parenthood's funding almost doubled overnight through Obamacare.
Well, think about Medicare for all. Then that's all government money, and if you got people, like you said, the last remaining one of the bunch out of all the people up on those debate stages who even had an ounce of dignity, Joe Biden throwing his towel in and saying he too was going to be against the Hyde Amendment. Well, if everybody's getting their health care through the government, like it was the first 2 years of Barack Obama's presidency, if it's controlled by a party that believes that abortion should be funded through the taxpayers, you're going to have nothing compared to what we had under Obamacare. It's going to be even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've actually already said that they're all for taxpayer-funded abortion.
Yep.
Hands down, for any reason, all 9 months of pregnancy. that's what we're going to be funding. So I have a question. You are now the president-elect of YAF, Young Americans Foundation. I have the honor of kind of being a YAF speaker.
Yeah, quite a bit.
I spoke at a YAF conference recently, so did you, as the new interim president. I believe you're taking hold of the presidency February 2021.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so
longest president-elect ever, but I tried a couple years ago to be president-elect, so I'm going to squeeze as much out of it as I can.
That's right. You can get it all in now, right? I don't know if the inaugural ball will be quite as grand for this one, but yeah. So you're going to be working with young conservative kids on college and high school campuses. I'm excited because I hope that we can partner with Students for Life, because I think this is important that, pro-life students understand why voting matters, why voting pro-life matters, and that means voting conservative in most cases. But I also think it's important because I hear this a lot from conservative kids of, well, I'm fiscally conservative, but I think we should leave the social issues alone. What do you say to young people who say that?
Well, it's real simple. It actually fits in with an argument I often make just in general on campuses about the difference between socialism and freedom. Some people say capitalism. I just say freedom, free enterprise, freedom in general. And that is, I contrast a taxi with an Uber. I said taxis are like socialism, the far left these days. Taxis are in cities that are highly regulated, highly restricted. They only let certain people in. They box everybody else out. There's usually a big fee, a big tax involved with it, because kind of like that philosophy, they believe the government should make those decisions. They believe in the government. I said those of us right of center who believe in free enterprise and freedom, we're kind of like Uber. Uber says as long as the driver and the passenger are safe, they don't care whether you drive once a day or all day long. They don't care if it's a hobby or a profession. All they care about is that safety. And that's really kind of my point of view is, live your own dream, run your own life, pursue your own career, do whatever you want, as long as you don't hurt the health and safety of your neighbors, which is in a just society where we uphold the laws. Yeah. It's why top of the list, obviously for me, is protecting the sanctity of the unborn, of innocent life, all the way through a natural death. Those are things that fit into that. But beyond that, we're saying, hey, you want to do other stuff? I'm not going to mess with your other decisions. I'm not going to tell you what to do. We're going to care for those in the greatest need. We're going to protect the health and safety of our neighbors. And it's interesting, when people hear that, they kind of go, okay, that makes sense. But the argument about social issues, I said, well, it's inherent. How can anything else? It's like a foundation building block. If you don't believe in the sanctity of life, in this country, of any country in the world, it's a country based on the principle of freedom.
Yeah, that's right.
That our declaration talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you can't have access to life, then what else matters out there? And the line has been drawn. Some people, when I was a kid, they say, oh, well, it's only in the first 2 trimesters. And then it was, partial birth abortion. And now it's literally talking about people who, and I say it's not infanticide, it's not live birth abortion. What Ralph Northam was talking about in Virginia earlier this year is flat out murder. Because if you waited, as a couple did recently out in California, it's a horrific story where they strangled their newborn child a few hours after they came home from the hospital. I got pushback. I almost got shut off of Twitter for retweeting that news story and saying, that's horrific, but how much different is that story from the one Ralph Northam talked about, other than a few hours? I think when people hear that, and we talk about that again from our heart, not just from our head,
that's right.
It can make a huge difference for any age, but particularly on our campuses.
Yeah, I can't believe that Twitter almost put you in Twitter jail for that. Apparently, anytime now I tweet anything, a picture, a link, anything, it always says you have to click here. I'm like, what did I tweet out? I'm blaming Live Action. I probably retweeted Lila or something.
We had a YAF, actually you mentioned YAF. YAF had a video that they tweeted of a group on the University of Wisconsin-Madison, very liberal campus, but a group of pro-life students who had abortion posters out there who were pro-life.
The Great Eagle display, I think.
Right, and the woman came out from her minivan and came up and started spray painting there, and they videotaped. They were actually, the videotape showed they were very, as they usually are, very polite, and said, hey, ma'am, you just can't do this. This is private property. You can't do this. You can't do it. They were smart enough to follow her back to her minivan, got her license plate, and then later on the clip, on the reel, they showed that the police, the University of Wisconsin Police Department actually picked her up and did an interview and the whole bit. And she talked about being triggered. Well, yeah, it is. I can understand what triggered. It's probably why we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, no, I did this video with Gunnar, my oldest, and I explained abortion to him a couple months ago. I put it up on Instagram. There was no bloody images, but I had fetal models, some of the tools, and we kind of videotaped it because I wanted Gunnar was very expressionate,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to capture like a person's actual expression, their gut instinct when they hear about abortion, and the comments I got, from the pro-abortion left were, this person's brainwashing a child. How dare you tell your child that what you're triggering? And I'm like, if you have such a problem with what I just described, then how can you support abortion? Like, if you're going to be pro-abortion, if you're going to be pro-choice, then be all in. Be okay with what I described. If you have something wrong with what I described, then you think there's something wrong with abortion.
But remember, these are the same people who came after me and other governors and leaders across the country when we passed laws that require them to provide an ultrasound before an abortion is performed. And like, well, how awful that is that she would have to see that. You're like, to know what you're going to do? I mean, to know? I mean, that in this day and age, I can't fathom that. Matt and Alex, Matt was born in June, Alex was born in July. Tonette and I have both, even though it's 25 years later, we have both of their first baby pictures, which are ultrasound images that were very grainy back then.
Yeah,
Today, I have friends who show me their kids or their grandkids on their iPhones, and they're 3D.
Oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I have mine.
Yeah.
I can see my children's, all their facial features.
Yeah.
Who they were going to look like.
Well, Matthew, even those grainy ones, had his hand out. It was a side angle, and you could see him sucking his thumb. And obviously, I was pro-life already then, but there was no denying it when you saw it there.
That's right.
Which is why I get why Planned Parenthood and others don't want people to see that.
Yeah.
Because if you see it, how can you justify taking that life?
Yeah, I mean that's the left's entire mantra, right? It was dehumanize that preborn child. To call that child a fetus, a parasite, a blob of tissue. Call it whatever you want, but don't call it a baby. Don't call it a child. Because you can't.
Right, and the amazing part about it, I always think to myself, when you see now that you can really see it with those ultrasound, when you see the beating heart.
Yeah.
And you think, again, just the logic of it, not only the emotion of seeing that the baby in the hands but the beating heart. I mean, the definition of death is in part when a heart ceases to beat. If my heart stops, I have a heart attack, I'm dead. So the opposite of that is when my heart starts, I'm alive, right? By logic.
Yeah, they don't subscribe to logic on college campuses, sadly, a lot of
No.
times. We'll see that when we're on tour together this fall, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit today about Students for Life Action, what we're doing, just to give everybody at home kind of an update. So we're going to be engaged in Virginia. You've been already engaged in Virginia because this is a fight, for the state legislature. Virginia has gone blue, very liberal in the governor and lieutenant governor races. The state legislature has been keeping, those New York style law, Illinois style laws at bay. Kathy Tram, who introduced that abortion up to the moment of birth bill, she got shot down really quick this year because there were pro-life Republicans. Well, the state was redistricted. I think it was like a University of California, Berkeley professor got to draw the redistricting lines.
It just shows you how crazy. Eric Holder, this is a good example. Eric Holder, the former attorney general under Barack Obama. Holder and Obama have raised something like $250 million. They've got Terry McAuliffe, who was the governor of Virginia, involved with it now too. They're raising about $400 million. So in states like Virginia and elsewhere to come in and litigate, or as we call sue until it's blue, but come in and redraw those boundaries, which puts pro-life majorities at a serious risk across the nation.
And that's
we
what
can
we're
do something about in Virginia.
And that's where we're seeing the majority of pro-life laws being passed. We had 300 pro-life laws were introduced just this year alone. There's been more than 300 to 400 pro-life laws passed in the last decade. And so all of the progress we're seeing has been on the state legislative side. My very first episode of Explicitly Pro-Life was why state politics matters. We tend to focus all on Washington, D.C. And while the Supreme Court is hugely important for our post-Roe America, nothing really happens in Washington, D.C., if you haven't noticed.
Yeah, even more so these days.
All the action is happening in the states. And last year there was a report that came out from the Reproductive Healthcare Investors Alliance.
It
was this big report that all the big mega, pro-Planned Parenthood, pro-abortion donors had put together, and it was a study of where it was, a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and where one of their biggest weaknesses they identified, one of their biggest opportunities was state legislative action. They identified that we're winning in states, and they can't keep up. That's why you saw, the New York law passed, then the Repeal Act in Illinois, why Kathy Tram tried her silly business. So we're going to be in Virginia. You and I are going to be touring some schools in Virginia, trying to get young pro-life students students to go out, door knock. We're going to be making phone calls into key districts to make sure we can try to keep that legislature red, keep it pro-life. We're going to be partnering with a group that I'm close friends with Susan B. Anthony list, and try to make sure no one's reduplicating the wheel and busing in students. So we want people to come to Virginia to help us. That's going to be key. It's going to be a good battleground for us since we've launched this new organization, getting ready for 2020.
Right.
Because we're going to be fighting, there's going to be several swing states, Senate swing states, and presidential swing states coming up in 2020 that we're going to have to be prepared for. But we're also going to be in state legislatures too. This year, Students for Life Action, we were monitoring more than 20 pieces of legislation. We testified in dozens of states, had young pro-life kids testifying against bills, in favor of bills.
Powerful. Giving
a different perspective. I think it's really great. Like in Washington State, we always show up. We have our blue I'm the Pro-Life Gen shirts. Planned Parenthood shows up pink shirts, and all the young people are in blue, right? The legislators all the times, they think that we're the pro-abortion forces because all the old white people are the Planned Parenthood people. And we're like, no, this is who we are.
Right.
We're the pro-life generation. So we're gonna be involved. We've got the RU46 bound California. It's still waging right now, the SB 24, which we believe will be passed and signed into law before end of October, which will allow the state of California to dispense the abortion drug on every single college campus, which they want to kind of transfer over to all the states and kind of be the test ground for California. We've got some defunding Planned Parenthood efforts going on. So we have a lot to do. And it's exciting because there's so much for, I think, the pro-life generation to do. Because I think often, and I'm sure you've heard this before, even from your sons, or you've probably heard it from millennials in the campaign trail of just feeling like I vote, but nothing ever changes.
Right.
But you really can make a difference.
You can make a total difference, both in terms of lobbying and speaking out and reaching out to state lawmakers, and at the same time, as you're going to see in Virginia this year, reaching out. This is where that report you talked about, why there's such a threat, because true grassroots activism has a much greater impact than the kind of big money we've seen out of Planned Parenthood in the congressional and Senate races. You make a tremendous difference in a legislative race, and so just helping a handful of more students go out and knock on doors, which is a lot of fun. That's actually where I started getting involved, was with Students of Life, knocking on doors myself in college. It's a lot of fun, but it can make a tremendous impact, particularly on the legislative level.
And you don't actually need that much money to do it. No. You just need a lot of willing, able bodies.
Yep.
I think the biggest expense for us is going to be renting the charter buses to bus students in from Michigan and Ohio, students who need a ride and then get hotel rooms for everybody. So if you know a funder, make sure you send your checks to Students for Life Action. But if you're a young person, make sure sign up and go to Students for Life Action website, studentsforlifeaction.org. Sign up to be a part of your state squad because we're going to need you. We're going to need all hands on deck in Virginia. And I think this is a great kind of test case battleground for the pro-life generation to show that we care and that we're going to put our essentially money where our mouth is, that we're going to get out there and pound the pavement. And honestly, you're right. Like, knocking on doors can be a lot of fun. If you're kind of like us, sometimes it can be scary for people. Yeah. But once you get, the first few, if you go with a friend.
And people help out. Exactly. A lot of times, if you haven't done it before, somebody else goes out with you. You find out it's a lot of fun. If you got a Fitbit, hey, bring it along.
Oh, there
it's
you
easy,
go.
Good way to get steps in. But between Virginia, the Commonwealth there in terms of legislative races, and the Commonwealth of Kentucky, where we've got a really important race for governor. Those two races, Students for Life and the students involved with on our campuses helping in each of those respective races will make a big, big difference.
I mean, you talk about Kentucky, we're going to be busing students in there. I mean, you've got one of the most pro-life governors right now serving, who has been under attack from day one.
Absolutely.
And has done everything possible to try to shut down that last remaining abortion facility there in Louisville. So it's really important that we get out there, support Governor
Matt
Levin.
Bevin is great.
He's fantastic. So make sure you sign up with Students for Life Action. And I'm going to be interested to see how things go at YAF and partnering with you in the future, because this is something that, I was speaking to a YAF audience a couple weeks ago, and I was amazed. I think there has been a shift in the young conservative movement. I remember when I first started Students for Life, we went to a CPAC, we went to other conservative events. We were kind of like the redhead stepchild. Like, oh, here comes the pro-lifers, here comes the social conservatives, the SOCOs.
Right.
But that's now the majority. It's a mainstream position within the Republican Party, within the conservative movement.
As it is amongst young people in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of those people misunderstand, certainly the media does, that, again, it's a human rights issue. It's a way to make a difference. It's a way to have an impact. And it can be aligned with all these other things. And I felt for years that more and more young people are more libertarian than they are liberal. But it's just a matter of conveying that. So all this, but people want to make a difference. They don't want the government necessarily dictating their lives, which is why I say a little bit more libertarian. We just got to make the case when it comes to the pro-life movement that you can be a libertarian and still be pro-life, have a libertarian trend, because you're saying, hey, government, stay out of the rest of my life. I don't want you to overregulate me or do all these other things.
Or make me have really crappy health care.
Yeah, but I think a fundamental responsibility of government at any level is to protect the life and liberty of our citizens. And what's more important than that when it comes to pro-life movement?
That's right. Amen. I have nothing more to say. All right. Thanks for tuning in this week to Explicitly Pro-Life. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere podcasts are available. Thanks, guys.